it turns out to be the most subtle, but maybe the most important attribute because it bridges between the scale attributes and the ideas attributes. So interfaces, I think they could write a whole book on just interfaces. I think it's such a powerful concept. It's the capability that allows you to manage the abundance and decide what you bring in. So what interfaces allow you to do is to manage your scale attributes. So for example, X Prize does it manually where they have hundreds of teams competing for a prize. And then they have to figure out what to work on and how to deal with. So the more you can automate that, the better. The classic poster child for interfaces are APIs, where we've been using automatic programming interfaces for connecting to websites and getting data and running transactions, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have a customized capability, I'll give you a few examples that'll make it home. Uber's interface with their drivers is actually an interface, which is actually a form of IP. How they interface with their drivers is a key success factor for Google. If they can do that effectively, then they are in a very powerful position. Or Google or Apple, how they deal with their app store developers and how which apps get accepted or not. It's largely handled with AI. So they have an AI-enabled interface in that case. Google took it the furthest, where they took AdSense and made the supply side of offering an ad as and automate the demand side of consuming an ad. So basically, when you automate both sides of supply and demand, you can scale infinitely, and they need it at the scale that they have, right? So basically, what the interfaces do is they act as matching and filtering systems for taking abundance coming from the scale attributes and deciding what should the company work on or exception handling, and can you handle most of this automatically, et cetera, et cetera. It's really that bridge between the control systems and stabilization systems of the company versus the potential growth drivers on the outside. Okay. The more you automate, the more you eliminate errors and delays. So you're not manually writing data, et cetera, et cetera. A really important way the interfaces show up is user interface. Okay. So for example, if you take Kayak, which is a travel search engine, which does federated search, you can say, I want to go from Riyadh to LA, and it'll search through all the airlines and give you kind of the best price. Just a decent interface, a user interface in that case has resulted in Kayak being $1 billion company just because they are able to do that. Probably the best example of an EXO as an interface attribute is Shopify. Shopify allows you to self-provision a storefront and do navigate the demand side and the supply side. And you can scale your operations without a proportional increase in scaling resources or complexities. Right? And so interfaces basically at the heart of it allow you to do very rapid, seamless data exchange across multiple functions in a company. And if you can master that, you can allow infinite scale by automating the service around this. So interfaces become really foundational to positioning a business for exponential growth. I think when you look at that gap and the automation of the supply side or the demand side, I think the least understood and most powerful dynamics of business itself. There's no business books on how do you connect your company with your supply chain and doing that in an effective way. And so I think this becomes really powerful going forward. That's a quick summary of interfaces. In the book, we have a whole bunch of case studies around what are great examples, Shopify, Google, AdSense, et cetera, et cetera. But each company has its own interfaces between Uber managing its drivers or us managing the community, et cetera, et cetera. So let me pause there, take some questions or discussion. I think a key question is how many of you have any kind of an automated interface for your organizations?
The idea of interfaces is to automate as much of your organization as possible, and mostly the information coming from the outside world, right? But I guess where things often get concerning for people is that there's multiple different touch points. And so where should you actually start, right? Because yes, you can potentially leverage tools like Zapier or Make or something like that in the beginning. Is that the best place to start, or is the best thing to do to build something of your own? So what recommendation would you give there? If currently my business interface is me on a phone.
That's a great pointer to the fact that we're now going to start to use AI to basically automate interfaces in a way that we've never been able to do before. Customer service is basically an interface problem. And if you can have an AI running customer interface, then it's really powerful. I'll give an example here. Klarna, which is a fintech out of Sweden, what they do is they offer installment payments for fridges and ovens to customers. They have about 150 million users, primarily in Europe, doing installment payments for their fridge, etc. And they manage all of that on behalf of the e-commerce site. Klarna employed a customer service AI, and in 1 month, in the first month that it was active, it did the work of 700 customer service agents, handled 2.3 million customer service phone calls and engagements, did it 80% better than a human being, and cost zero. They basically estimated it would save them $40 million in the first year. Okay. And what's powerful there is that's the worst it's ever going to be. It completely changes the game once you start adding AI to the interface layer. It'll figure out a lot more things than you could ever do, and it'll learn along the way. AI-powered interfaces becomes a holy grail for any company because now you can manage all of that scale automatically and really, really do some cool stuff.
Yeah. So if I'm starting out, then what would step one look like?
I think step one is you want to, so if you're building in EXO, right? We do MTP, build community, create the founding team, have the breakthrough idea, get to your MVP. What's your minimum viable product? Then you start implementing the ideas and scale attributes. And as the first thing to do is implement the scale attributes, like how are you going to deal with staff on demand, leveraged assets, etc. Once you have a notion of how you're going to do that, the next question is where can I automate my interface between the company and say the staff on demand, or between the leveraged assets, etc. One of the things I think is going to be most powerful, one of these scale attributes is engagement, right? And our poster child for engagement is Octalysis. I think you'll end up with an AI dashboard managing your entire user base using Octalysis gamification, and just let it go, and it'll figure out what you should be doing next. So I think there's really a huge opportunity here for companies to figure out where do they automate, et cetera, et cetera. We can actually use our chat function on our website to figure out, hey, here's a bunch of data about my company. Where are their interfaces I should be looking to automate? And it'll look at that. Another way to think about it is where are you spending the most time and effort managing externalities, and then build interfaces to drop a cost on each of those. So in the Klarna case, they had like several thousand customer service people, and now they can radically drop the number of those, or have those folks focus on the more difficult use cases and the exception handling and the more difficult clients where the AI can handle most of the easy answers, right? Or Uber with its drivers, how could it navigate that? So some very huge opportunities coming down the pike in all of this.